Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Welcome to Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. In the previous session, we have discussed regarding the networking using Java with different classes of java.net package. Now in these sessions, we are going to discuss about database connectivity. How do we establish database connections using Java? Okay, in each and every applications that we see that requires data manipulation, and data that we are manipulating are retrieved from certain kinds of databases. Okay, so underlying databases will be different, and how do we establish a front-end Java application connections with the back-end database? So it is very critical and very important task for the programmers to establish the connections with a database using the Java programs. So to learn the database connectivity in Java, we need to use java.sql package, and that we are going to leverage it in these sessions, that how do we establish a connection with a database. Okay, before that let us see what exactly the database connection is. That it provides a method. JDBC is generally a API. JDBC, Java Database Connection, Java Database Connectivity even, is an API which allows user, Java developer, to perform database tasks like connection creation, firing the queries, retrieving the results, manipulating the data, updating the data, and these all are we can say stuffs we can perform using the JDBC API, because API provides number of classes and interfaces, and that will be implemented to perform the Java database tasks. JDBC library is implemented in the java.sql package. As I told, it consists of set of interfaces and classes. Now when we are talking about database connections with a Java application, so what happens, see that at the topmost level, at the application level, there is a Java application. Java application establishes or uses the JDBC API to establish the connections with the underlying database. So there would be a different database, maybe a MySQL, Oracle, Sybase, and other database will be. So generally the common architecture, if we want to visualize, we can say that the Java application uses JDBC API to establish the connections with the underlying database. Now how it works, if once we have a program and we are using JDBC applications, how can we visualize it? Through diagram, let us see that there would be a driver manager. Driver manager allows us to load the driver and establish the connection. Then after, once the connection is established, we can create this statement. Using these statements, we can fire the query to the database and get the result back in terms of result set. Okay, so this is, we can say, from the Java program side. Under that, the JDBC API is used. Okay, and the JDBC API helps us to establish the connections with the database. Now when we are talking about JDBC, then the question must comes that what kind of drivers that we can use to establish the connections with the underlying database. So generally JDBC drivers comes in 4 flavors, and we can say they are also known as the type 1 kind of driver, type 2, type 3, and type 4. So what is type 1 driver? The generally type 1 driver are known as the JDBC ODBC bridge. The JDBC ODBC bridge simply works not using the ODBC driver and establishes the connections with the underlying database. It generally comes in the JDK inbuilt, but from the JDK 8 onwards, it is not supported in a, we can say, Java API, JDBC API. Then after, type 2 driver comes, and they are known as native API partly Java driver. The native API partly Java drivers converts JDBC commands into a DBMS specific native call. So there should be a certain binary code available on the systems to establish the connections with the backend database. Then after, there comes a type 3 driver. Type 3 driver is known as JDBC net pure Java driver. What does it mean? So generally this kind of driver translates the JDBC call into a database independent network protocol. JDBC call will be translated into a database independent protocol and sends it to the middle level server. Then the middle level server will receive and translate the same network independent database independent network protocol to the DBMS specific protocol, and it sends to the database, and result is sent back in the reverse order same way and translated back to the client. And then after comes the type 4 driver. Type 4 driver are the, we can say, the pure Java drivers that we are using and we will use to establish the connections with the backend database. So type 4 drivers are generally known as, we can say, a pure Java driver. Now let us come to the main point about the JDBC connections, that to establish a JDBC connection we will use java.sql package. Now this package contains various important classes and interfaces. So among that, which are those classes that we will use to establish the connection? Among that, let's have a see. First, the first class is driver manager class. What it does? The generally driver manager class helps us to establish the connection with the backend database, and then after using this connection we can manipulate data and perform certain other tasks as and when required. Apart from driver manager, there are types classes there which defines a constants to different SQL types. Date class is there, used to map the java.util.date to java.sql date type. Then time class is there, is used to map the java.util.time with SQL time. Timestamp class is there, is used to map the java.util.timestamps with the SQL timestamp. Then after, we can say, after discussing these classes, there are certain other interfaces is there which helps us to manipulate the database data. Then from that, among that, the most important one is driver interface. So each and every JDBC driver must implement the driver interface. Okay, when we are talking about drivers, then the driver is the interface in JDBC. So each and every JDBC driver must implement this driver interface. Then after, we can say a connection interface is there. What does connection interface does? The connection interface helps us to get the connection established. Once the connection is established, we can create a statement, and using the statements we can get the result set. The connection interface establishes a connection. Statement interface used for executing the SQL statement against the database. Result set metadata provides the information about the, you can say, the data about data of the result set. Okay, so if you want a further deeper information regarding the result set that has been returned by the SQL query, we can use result set metadata interface, which is having number of methods which returns the metadata. Then after, result set interface is there. The result set interface returns, or it represents a SQL statement. Using the SQL statements we can get the result set. We can set the records even. Result set is generally a set of records, that once we fire a query to the database, it will return a set of records, and that will be known as result set. Then after that comes a prepared statement, callable statement, and database metadata. The prepared statement are generally known as the precompiled statement, that we are going to discuss in detail. Callable statements are the statements which will be used to call the stored procedure from the database. Then after, database metadata interface is there, provides access to the database systems catalog if you want further information of the database catalog. Now after discussing the various classes and interfaces of JDBC or java.sql package, now it's time to proceed towards establishing a connections with the database. Now there are certain steps that we will follow to establish the connection with the backend database. So which are those steps? The first of all, the steps very important is this: import JDBC packages. So the only single package that we need right now to import is java.sql package. Once it is import java.sql.star, our first task is over. Then the second task is load and register the JDBC driver. Okay, after importing the package, the most important task is to load the driver, and that depends on what kind of database we are using. If we are using Oracle, we have to load the Oracle driver. If we are using MySQL, we have to load the MySQL drivers. If Sybase is there, then we have to use the Sybase driver. That means with respect to our database, we have to load the driver, and to load the driver, the method used are this: driver manager dot register driver, or we can say class dot font name. Mostly used is this one, class dot font name. Then after, specify the drivers that you want to install. Right now here we have mentioned the Oracle driver, so we have written the Oracle string here, which indicates that we are going to register, we are going to load the Oracle driver for our database application. So which method is used? For name method of class. Okay, java.lang.class is there, and the class as a method for name to load the driver of a particular database. Then the next step is to connecting to a database. Once the driver is loaded, the next important task is to establish the connections with a database. So for that we will use get connection method. The get connection method returns the instance of a connection. Get connection method will return the instance of a connection interface, and that we will use to get and fire the create the statement, and we can say execute the query. The connection once the connection interface instance is there, we will create a statement object using the connection. See here, CONN is the instance that has been returned from this get connection method execution. Once this method executes, it returns the connection instance. This is known as, or right now we have mentioned it as a CONN, but it is a connection instance. The connection instance helps us to create a statement using the method create statement. So create statement method is the method of connection interface. So this, once this method will execute, it will return us the statement instance. It will return us the statement instance. So we are creating the statements instance using the connection create statement method. Once this will execute, we have a statement instance to fire the query to the underlying database. The next step is to fire the query and returning the result set. So once we already know that we have a statement instance in the previous slide. Then we are using it to fire a query, select employee number, name, salary, department from employee, order by employee name. Okay, and that the returned result set, returned record will be stored in the result set instance R set, in the R set, and we have now our number of records in this instance result set, and we can manipulate it using the methods of, we can say, a scrollable result set to fetch records, all these things as we have received from the query. So after executing the query, we can manipulate the data, we can process data as per our requirement, and then after we can print it, and at last we will close the connection. Once we will close the connection, all the instance is going to be closed. Our connection established, we already, that means we will release the resources occupied. Now creating a JDBC statement. When we are talking about statement, we can say the statements allows us to fire the queries to the underlying database. So there are three kinds of statement available in JDBC. One is a normal statement that we have already seen, used for general purpose access to the database. Second one, it is useful when we are using static SQL statement at runtime. Second is used, that second statement, at the prepared statement. What is prepared statement? The prepared statement is simply, as I told you, it is a precompiled statement. What does it mean? Precompiled means what? So generally what happens when we are firing any SQL to the database, it is first going to be verified, the SQL will be fetched, then it is going to be verified that it is okay or not as per syntax and semantics, then it is going to be compiled. Once it is successfully compiled, and then after it is executed. So it involves number of steps before it gets executed. So if we have a precompiled statements ready for execution, then if a situation is like that we want a certain kind of statements to be executed repeatedly, number of times, then think of the scenario that all this repetitive statement execution will execute all the steps we have discussed earlier. It will be fetched, checked and compiled. So all times it will process from all these steps. Instead, if we will use a precompiled statement, that means single statement is there which is already precompiled, and if we will use the same statements using the prepared statements to execute it, so it will save us a time, and also it performs better in terms of, we can say, throughput, performance point of view also. The prepared statement is used whenever the prepared statement interface accepts input parameter at runtime. That means precompiled is there, we will provide the input at runtime instead of, we can say, a static input provided at a normal statement interface. Then after the third interface, third statement is callable statement. Callable statement is used to invoke a stored procedure from the database. We create a stored procedure at backend side, and then after we will use callable statement instance to invoke it from the database. So, there are three types of statements: simple statement, prepared statement and callable statement. Now, we have we can say we have created this statement, we have seen the types of statement. Now, within the create statement method we can pass parameters. There are two main important arguments that we will pass. If we will not pass, then it is okay, then the default argument will be passed. But if we want to pass, we can pass it most importantly two arguments. The two arguments is known as, one is integer result set type and second one is result set concurrency. What does it mean? So, generally in simple terms, when we are using a create statement method without argument, that means it creates a non-scrollable result set. It creates a non-scrollable result set. That means we can't scroll the data we have retrieved from the, we can say, database. But from JDBC 2.0 we are using a scrollable result set by passing these arguments to the create statement method. The first argument would be this, both are the constant, one is result set type. So, in result set type you can pass either result set dot type underscore forward underscore only, which will just provide a cursor that will move forward only. You can pass result set dot type underscore scroll underscore insensitive. What does it mean? This, it indicates that the result set that is returned will be scrollable, but it is not going to be affected by the updates query or update statement, that it will be insensitive. And the third constant is result set dot type underscore scroll underscore sensitive. That means the result that is returned by the query will be scrollable. Apart from that, it is going to be updatable. That means it will reflect the latest data. It will reflect the latest data, while here it will reflect, it is having a scrollable, but it will reflect the old data, as it is insensitive to update, while it is sensitive to update query. So, it will reflect latest data. So, among these three you can pass any one constant at the first argument, and for second integer result set concurrency you can pass any one from these two, result set dot concur underscore read only. That means the first one, it simply creates a result set read only manner. So, there will not be any kind of updation or modification. Then second is result set dot concur underscore updatable. The concurrency mode that may be updated. That means you can update the result set. So, if you are using this method, then I said you that the default argument will be passed. So, what would be the default argument? The default would be first one, for the first argument result set dot type underscore forward only, and for the second one it would be result set dot concur underscore read only. This is going to be a default argument to a create statement method. And if you are using a second argument, either insensitive or sensitive, you have to pass result set dot concur underscore updatable. So, this is all most important thing, that if you want a scrollable result set, you need to be aware about these two constants that we are passing to a create statement method of a statement interface. Then after, we can say that once we have a statement instance, we can execute number of methods. The methods involves, most importantly, are the execute query, execute update and execute. These three methods are the methods of statement interface. Okay. So, once we have a statement instance, we can execute it, okay, using the statement interface, using the statement instance that execute. What is the difference? Now, we need to know the difference. First one, execute query. So, it returns a result set, while if you are using execute update, then it returns integer. What does it mean? Here it returns a set of records, okay, execute query returns a set of records in terms of result set. But if you are using execute update, that means suppose if you want to know that how many row has been affected by a particular query, then you can use execute update. So, it will return the value in terms of integer, that the number of rows has been affected, that this much rows has been affected by a particular query. The third method is execute. What does it mean? The execute method does what? It simply returns a boolean value. So, if you want to check that particular query has been executed or not, you do not want result set or we can say another status kind of things. but if you want to just want to confirm that whether the query has been executed successfully or not, then you just use execute statement, execute method. So, it will return either true or false. If the true is returned, you can confirm that the query has been successfully executed, and if it is false, then we can make sure that there is a problem and we will solve it. Okay. Then after the execute batch method is there, it is used to execute batch of commands. It will use to execute batch of commands. So, these are the main important methods of the statement interface: execute query, execute update, execute, and execute we can say batch. Now, once we have used methods of statement, we will retry. So, first we have used methods that execute. In the previous slides we have seen, see here, execute query returns result set. Once we have result set, we want to manipulate it. So, how do we manipulate? So, see here, execute query select star from student. So, it will return a result set in RS. That means RS contains number of records. So, how do we process through that? So, RS we will just traverse to the while loop using while RS dot next. If the record is there, and we can get it using the result set method get string, the database field name. Another record is there, then result set dot get integer, database field name. And same way you can traverse for, if record more than one record is there, then you can traverse through this till the loop get false, turns false, and it will display the and manipulate the records from the result set. Now, scrollable results set is having number of methods. As I told you that once you have a result set, you can scroll the result set backward and forth like that, having a number of methods. Using these methods, you can move next, previous, first, last, absolute, relative, get integer, string. So, these are various methods that you can use. Now, so this is all about a simple JDBC environment in which we have discussed about its steps and established the connections, then fired the query, returned the result set, manipulated the result set, displayed the results using the methods like next, previous, what we have discussed earlier. Now, it is all about prepared statement. Now, what is prepared statement? So, prepared statement we already discussed that it is used for precompile kind of environment. Okay, if we have. So, prepared statement can be used when we want the same SQL statement many times. That means, we have a precompiled statements and we want to execute these precompiled statements many times. So, it will save our time from the previous number of steps. It is used to handle precompiled query. Okay. Same query with different values for more than one time, then precompiled queries will reduce the number of compilations, as we already discussed the steps. So, how do we write a code for prepared statement? So, simply see here. So, we will create the instance of prepared statement pre-STMT and using the connection instance. CONN is the instance of connection. Connection is having a method prepare statement, and this prepare statement will return the instance of prepared statement. And once we have an instance of prepared statement, we can use it to pass the argument at runtime. See here we have used select distinct loan underscore type from loan master where bank is equal to question mark. So, which bank? So, which bank, that the bank will be passed at runtime. We will use this method set string. If it is a string argument we want to pass, then we will use set string method. If it is integer, then we will use set integer and pass the argument. That means, if the single argument is required, parameter is required, then you can use one SBI. If it is another question mark is there, then we have to pass second one, pre statement dot set string or set integer, second argument and the value that we want to, but the same way we can pass it. So, it is faster than the statement in Java, because same kind of statement is repeatedly executed. We only need to pass the argument over here, because it is already precompiled. We want to pass it only the arguments. So, prepared statement is very efficient when a same statement is required to be executed number of times and only the parameter is required at runtime. Now, next is callable statement. The callable statement, as we already said, that it is a statement which helps the user to execute stored procedure in a Java program. So, callable statement, how do we create callable statement? It is having the functionality of all functionality of prepared statement. Apart from that, we can create it. See, how do we create it? The same way prepared statement, we will create the instance of callable statement using the connection instance and call the method prepare call. Okay, we will here call a prepare call. This prepare call is used, okay, callable statement is generally used for three kind of environment: to execute a command, to execute a stored procedure, and to execute a function. So for command, SQL command, we will use SQL command as an argument. Okay, in a stored procedure we will create the same syntax connection.prepare call method, and we will write in a curly bracket call the procedure name with the procedure that we have created in a database, and then after we will pass the argument. Okay, like as we did in a prepared statement, one argument, second argument, and then after we will execute this statement dot execute method. So the parameter passed will be executed efficiently. And the third, if you want to call a function from the database, we will create a statement interface instance connection.prepare call, and we will call a function. So see here the syntax. In a stored procedure we were writing curly bracket and we were using call. So this will call the stored procedure, while here we are writing the call and function and argument, but at the same time we have written first initially question mark and is equal to is there. That means the difference between stored procedure and function is then the stored procedure will never return a value, while functions may return a value. So whatever the value it will return, that will be stored and it will be manipulated. So this is all about callable statement, that callable statements helps us to execute either a stored procedure, function, or to execute a SQL command from the database. Now if you want to get metadata for a result set, that means we have a result set but we want to manipulate it, data about data, that what kind of data, if you want to know the column name, column type, number of columns, table name, column label, then we can use these methods of the result set metadata and we can manipulate it, So this is all about a JDBC, its drivers, then classes, interfaces, different kinds of statement, methods of statement, result set metadata, and manipulation of result set data methods. Okay, now we will see the same thing using the program. So how do we manipulate and establish connection in a Java using the program? So let us have a look in the program. This is the simple program we have created just to test the database connection and to fetch the records from the database. So what we have done here is that we have simply first we have imported the java.sql package. Under that we have written the class definition, then the main method is there, and under the main, see here we have used try and catch block. It is very important. See, all the database connection statement, whether it is a driver loading statement, connection creation statement, statement creation is there, or result set statement is there, it must be in a try and catch block. So whenever any exception occurs, if the driver is not available, any host name is not available, then it will throw an exception, it must be catched. So always try to put all these statements in a try and catch. So first the line is that, see, class.foundName method, we already seen that is used to load the driver. Right now we are using a MySQL database. So we are loading the driver of MySQL, and the syntax is com.mysql.jdbc.driver. Okay, once this statement will execute, it will load the driver for our database. Then after we are using a connection instance to get the connection instance from driver manager class. So here we are creating the connection instance con is equal to driver manager dot get connection. Get connection method will return us an instance of connections once the connection is established with our backend database. So what we have written here, we are using a MySQL database. So we have written the JDBC colon MySQL colon / localhost colon 3306 is the, we can say, port number on which we will establish the connections, and the database is on our localhost on the same system. So we are using the localhost, and BAOU is the database name we have created in our MySQL data. Root is the username, and we have not kept any password, so password is left, we have left it blank. Okay, once the connection is established, it will return us a connection instance, and once we have a connection instance, we can use it to create statement. Once the statement is created, it will return us the statement instance S, and once we have a statement instance, we can fire the query to the database using this instance as dot execute query in bracket select star from students. The student is the name of table in our database BAOU, okay, and it once the statement will execute, it will return us the result set, and using this result set method next we will traverse all the records from the table and display it using the system.out.println result set dot get integer first one plus result set dot get string second. That means we are simply printing the records in the single line. So, we have used here the plus concatenated operator, and then after we are closing the connections. So, this is all about the Java applications that we have created a JDBC connection, but at the opposite end see in the database what we have done. This is MySQL. In a MySQL, see here we have created this database BAOU. Under this BAOU database we have a name table named student. Under the students we have two fields, S number and S name, and under the S number we have 4 records, duplicate records we already for testing purpose we have inserted, and S name is already there. So, 2 field is there, S number and S name. So, now what we are doing, we are just establishing the connection with BAOU and firing the query on this student table and fetching the records and displaying it Now, let us test it. Compilation is successful. Now, we will write the command to run the program. So, we can see that all the records stored in the database. Okay, in database we have 4 records, one student number 1 for 2 records and for student number 2 records is there, and the same record has been displayed here on our prompts. So, this way we can say that we can establish a Java database connectivity using the different steps of the java.sql package. So, this is all about java.sql package and JDBC environment. I hope you might have cleared your all points and confusion regarding the JDBC environment and establishing a Java connections with the backend database. So, we have seen and discussed that how do we establish a database connectivity in Java with a backend database, a MySQL database. The same way you can use Oracle, Sybase and other database, just only you need to have is the driver of a particular database. So, the same program you can use for other statements like callable statements to call the stored procedure and precompile statement for the prepared statement. I hope you might have cleared your all concepts of JDBC with this discussion. Thank you very much.